to to my knowledge, there have been no thorough studies on the connection with Bernard of Clairvaux in Hadewijch. There are now and then it is mentioned briefly, but there is no, strangely enough, there is no thorough study about that. Maybe it is useful that I first situate Hadewijch in time and space. We have no direct biographical information about her at all. In that sense, she is completely unknown. But her oeuvre shows that she probably lived in the first half of the 13th century in the Duchy of Brabant, Prince Bishopric of Liège, that she was familiar both with the spiritual literature of the Cistercians, that is very clear, and also with the profane culture of the troubadours, also very clear. Her work includes a cycle of visions, a collection of letters, and 45 poems. Well, for someone completely unknown, that is a lot. Moreover, her work has survived only in a small number of manuscripts, which makes her identity even more mysterious. It suggests that she was known only in a small circle. But most of her texts are of a very high literary quality. So we are dealing here with someone who lived and worked in the time before Marguerite Porret, before Meister Eckhart, wrote in the vernacular, and who belongs to the highlights of European literature. The great John of Ruysbroek quotes her very often, but he never mentions her name. Now, today, as an example of that connection of Hadewijch with Bernard of Clairvaux, unstudied, today, as an example, I would like to look at just one of her poetic texts, namely poem 12, and its intertextuality with Bernard's treatise. I will simply read the treatise stanza by stanza. Between brackets, the research has shown that these poems were actually songs. They were sung. But of this poem, we have not yet discovered the melody, not yet. Hopefully one day we will discover that. I read the text and I give a few words of comment after each stanza. Now is born, the first stanza, now is born the noble season that will bring us flowers in the land. So it is for the noble hearts chosen to bear the yoke, the bond of love. Fidelity ever blossoms in their hands with flowers, fruits of nobleness. Among them, the word is explored by fidelity. Among them, love remains constant through one friendship, intimately united in the highest counsel of love. Just as in the profane courtly love poetry, Hadewijch usually starts her poems with a scene from nature. And that is also the case here. But here in this poem, the scene is very short, and moreover, it contains, I think, a double meaning. So the word, the Middle Dutch word tiet, that is in the first line, is in the translation, in the English translation is season, but it is also in the French and in the Italian translation the case. So it's translated as season, which is possible indeed, but it can also mean time, simply time. And then maybe a theological dimension emerges here, namely that of the new time after the incarnation, which is for humanity a new spring, new life. Then the expression to bear the yoke, this could connect us already to the expression the yoke of truth in Bernard's text, the jugum veritatis. We'll come back to that. And then the expression the noble ones. In the text of Bernard, he says that in the beginning of the treatise, he says that the goal of those degrees is to conduct us at the truth. The noble ones, I think, here in Hadewijch's poem, are those who have ascended there. And I think the whole poem is about them, those who have really ascended. And in the same passage in the treatise, Bernard says that Christ is the example of this highest top of the mountain, the highest degree that these degrees can reach. And this Christological dimension helps us to interpret, I think, Hadewijch's expression, the word is explored, which is written, of course, it's not in the manuscript with a capital letter, but it is the word, the verbum, Christ, as it will become clear in the following stanza. My yoke is sweet, my burden light, says the lover of love himself. This word he has beautifully Okay. This word he had beautifully composed in love. Outside of love, one cannot know it as true, to my way of thinking. So for them, the light burden is heavy, and they suffer many alien fear. Them, those who live outside of love. For the servants, law is fear, but love is the law of sons. I think in this stanza, the connection with Bernard becomes very obvious. I draw your attention to the designation, the lover of love. In the French and Italian translation is maybe less explicit. The lover of love, as it is in Middle Dutch, the minnare der minne. Christ is, she calls him the lover of love. And moreover, so he is a poet of love. His words are love poetry, according to Hadewijch. And therefore, they cannot be understood outside of love. Indeed, because then one stands outside the fundamental attitude of Christ himself, and then one can understand the words, but one cannot understand them as true. Such a person can understand it semantically, but cannot understand the truth of it. And why is that? Well, the servants experience that yoke. They experience it as heavy, because after all, their law is fear. But the sons experience the yoke as light, for their law is love. The allusion to De Diligento Deo is obvious, of course. And now Hadewijch is going to continue in the next stanza that what she had said at the end of the previous one. What is this light burden of love and this sweet tasting yoke? It is the noble load of the spirit with which love touches the loving soul and unites it, the soul, to her, to love, with one will and with one being without reversal. The depth of desire pours out continually, and love drinks all that outpouring. the debt love summons love to pay is more than any mind can grasp. In this stanza, Hadewijch makes explicit how she interprets that light burden. What is that? That sweet yoke. It consists of three components. First, being touched by love. Now, in the work of Hadewijch, the word love is often a proper name for God. Not always, but very often it is a proper name for God, the Trinitarian love. Secondly, so first, being touched by love, by God. Secondly, becoming one of will, that is, becoming one love. And then, thirdly, experiencing that this transcends the human capacities. That is an important element. I go to the next stanza. No heart or mind could ever guess how anyone looks with love on his beloved, when love has heavily burdened him with love. He will not waste an instant's time until he passes with love through all to gaze with fidelity on true love. For all his judgments must be read in love's countenance, and there he sees clear truth without illusion in many a sweet pain. This stanza again connects to the previous one and explains what was said in the previous one, namely that this transcends the human capacities. And why is that? Well, because it presupposes a form of love that has no ground, no foundation. The Middle Dutch expression al doorvaren, in the English translation is to pass through all. Trying to look now at the other translations. Anyway, so the al doorvaren, as we know from the other works, means in the context of Hadewijch's thoughts that love is not identified with any mood, with any emotion, with any experience, also not with the contemplative experience. In other words, there is no, in love, as she conceives it, there is no fixed point for the loving subject, which, by the way, leads often to sharp criticism by Hadewijch about a love that is too superficial, namely when it has a safe ground, foundation. Really, complete love transcends the human capacities. And the truth of that complete love can be read in the face of love, she says. Now, given the connections with Bernard, we can perhaps understand this again from a Christological perspective. The countenance, namely Christ, countenance of love, of the transcendent love, Christ shows the clear truth of love in the full sense. And the verdict, I'm thinking here now of the severe truth in the Treatise of Bernard, the verdict is understood by Hadewijch as a truth that tells me that I do not really fully love. That is what we see in the next stanza. He sees in clarity that one who loves must live with full truth. And when he then understands with truth that he does too little for love, his noble mind is forcibly stirred, for in love's face he learns fully how love shall practice love, and this judgment sweetens his pain and makes him give all for all in order to content love. So the truth of love is its totality. And when one realizes in truth that one is not doing enough, not loving fully, then one could give up the whole adventure. But in the noble ones that Hadewijch is talking about, this realization does not make one give up the love adventure, but on the contrary, it causes a kind of positive storm of desire. And thus the lover gives all for all. An expression that comes back very often in the works of Hadewijch. Next stanza. To those who give themselves thus to contend love, what great wonders shall happen? With love they shall cleave in oneness to love, and with love they shall contemplate all love, drawing through their secret veins in the wine cellar, where love gives all love and inebriates all her drunken friends with love, in amazement before her violence. This remains wholly hidden from the aliens, but well known to the wise. This stanza together with the next is the climax of the poem. Hadewijch refers here to what she calls the miracle, the wonder of the total self-gift in love. It's a very important theme in the work of Hadewijch. And that wonder is to become love. The person not only loves, but becomes love. And her point is that this essentially involves a participation in the Trinitarian life, and therefore this wordplay on love, love with capital L and with the lowercase l. This is the unity of love, as has been said before, also seeing through everything, and finally entering the wine cellar. Now, for that, this the entering the wine cellar, the Middle Dutch conduit is used. It's a somewhat unusual word in Middle Dutch, and you see that the translators struggle with it. Both not only the English, but also both the French and the Italian. It seems to me that conduit is an equivalent of the medieval Latin conditum as a synonym for cellarium. And then we have to translate it as wine cellar, which seems very plausible given the context and the background of the Song of Songs. Also, Bernard quotes it in the first part of his treatise, but he follows the reading cubiculum of Canticle 1:3 and Canticle 2:4. Bernard quotes it as cubiculum, but the Vulgate reads cellarium. Anyway, it's the same verse of the Song of Songs. Now, of all this, Hadewijch says that it is unknown to the aliens. The aliens is a theme in the work of Hadewijch which refers to all those who are alien to love, who are outside of it. But it is known and even manifest to the wise. You can see here a creative reception of this same theme in Bernard's treatise. Bernard, who in a way remains closer to the text of the gospel. In the case of Bernard, the wise are the proud and the children are the humble. Last stanza then. To all who desire to love, may God grant that they be so prepared for love that they all live on her riches until they, as love, draw love into themselves, so that nothing evil on the part of cruel aliens can befall them more, but they shall live free to cry, I am all love's, and love is all mine. What can now disturb them? Under their power stand the sun, the moon, and the stars. So this last stanza expresses the ideal of living solely on the wealth of love, on nothing else. That is, not needing any other foundation or motive for love. In Hadewijch's other works, it is expressed as a love without a why, of course, related to Bernard's De Diligendo Deo. And that attitude of living and loving in that way draws love into them, says the poem. Hadewijch connects this elsewhere in her work with the Virgin Mary, who, she says, drew Christ into her through her humility. I think the connection with Bernard is also clear. This condition can be called a deification in our terms. Indeed, Hadewijch confirms that nothing can go wrong for these persons because they live in the highest possible freedom of dilectus meus mihi et ego illi. And this is nothing less than participating in the divine love by which the sun, the moon, and the stars are moved. More than 1 century later, Dante would end the Divine Comedy with a similar expression, la mort che muove il sole e le altre stelle. I conclude, this poem seems to me a kind of poetic dialogue with Bernard's treatise. Anyone who has read the first chapters of Bernard will see that immediately. And I think the reader is meant to see it. Theologically speaking, Hadewijch maybe goes one step further than Bernard, namely by making that topic of deification so explicit. The noble hearts, about whom this poem is, the noble hearts are those who participate in the life of Christ. Bernard has provided all the elements for this in his treatise, and Hadewijch poetically draws on it and draws from it a radical conclusion. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much for this close reading of the fascinating text. Je propose maintenant de passer aux questions en demandant donc à nos 2 précédents orateurs de me rejoindre. Donc nous avons une vingtaine de minutes pour cet échange. Oui, Alexis Grélois.
À dire vrai, j'ai une question pour chacun. Pour Marielle, tu as fait référence une critique éventuelle d'Alexandre III. Je me demande si on ne pourrait pas remonter plus tôt à l'époque d'Eugène III. Pardon, puisque je peux se demander s'il n'y a pas un écho de la considération chez Elred. Pour Guy, ma question est la suivante, enfin c'est plutôt une réflexion. Effectivement, Leclerc a eu tendance à bloquer en quelque sorte la datation des premiers traités vers 1124, vers 1125 en fonction de la venue des légats qui demandent, enfin en particulier d'un légat qui demande le texte. Mais en tout cas, dans le cas de l'apologie, il y a des strates différentes, un vocabulaire différent qui montre que la rédaction s'étale sur une longue durée. Et donc, ma question, ça serait, est-ce que la dédicace à Geoffroy ne daterait pas de 1124-1125 quand Geoffroy revient à Clairvaux, mais sur la base d'un texte qui ne lui aurait pas forcément été dédié au départ? And the question for Father Faesen is, is there any connection between the Bernard's treatise on humility and somebody you were supposed to talk about, but you didn't talk about her, Christine of Nazareth?
Oui, alors pour la première question, c'est vrai que c'est difficile de savoir d'abord si ça fait référence à un pape en particulier, donc Eugène III éventuellement. Et là, j'irai effectivement sur ta suggestion, revoir d'un peu plus près les termes des considérationnés. En fait, c'est un petit peu paradoxal parce que les cisterciens sont là, enfin, le support, on peut dire, d'une certaine affirmation théocratique en faveur des papes. Et en même temps, voilà, il y a ce point de vue moral qui invite à une forme de conversion, enfin qui les appelle à la conversion.
Oui, très juste question. Bon, celle de la datation des œuvres de Bernard est parfois très aisée, mais pour les premiers traités, elle est complexe justement parce qu'il y a un temps de réécriture qui s'étend sur toute l'existence de Bernard. Bien. Cela dit, pour ce qui est de la rétractation à Geoffroy, on pourrait tout à fait se dire que Bernard lui envoie cela. Une fois que Geoffroy est installé à Fontenay, et pour le rappeler à certaines exigences. Et par ailleurs, je trouve que vraiment les toutes premières lettres de la collection contiennent un vocabulaire extraordinairement proche de celui du traité de l'humilité. Voilà. Cela dit, le fait des réécritures est massif et c'est ça qui doit être désormais travaillé avec un peu plus d'ardeur. Bon, tout à l'heure, dans mon stress, je ne retrouvais plus la page de conclusion, mais dans ma conclusion, j'ajoutais un argument à ces phases de reconstitution, enfin de transformation du traité, plus exactement. Je voulais évoquer le manuscrit de Sidi qui est conservé à Charleville. Cette version a dû arriver à Signy vers 1135 dans les bagages de Guillaume de Saint-Thierry, quand il prend sa retraite en quelque sorte dans un monastère cistercien. Et précisément, la version recopiée plus tard à Signy n'est pas celle de Clairvaux des années 1153 et suivantes. Voilà, donc je m'en tiens à ça. En tout cas, merci.
Yeah. And as to the question whether Beatrice of Nazareth in that treatise, there are certainly connections with Bernard, several connections, also with this the treatise of the degrees, but not so striking, I think, as Hadewijch. And one of the reasons why I changed my topic is also because in the case of Beatrice, it's somewhat obvious she was a Cistercian. While Hadewijch, it's always said that she is a Beguine, but she was a Beguine, but I don't believe it. I think she is much closer to the world, Cistercian world, as what usually is said. That's why I changed the topic.
Merci à tous les trois. Moi aussi, j'ai trois questions, enfin, bon, chacun. Alors, d'abord, pour vous, Marielle Lamy, vous avez mentionné Abraham. Je voulais vous demander s'il y avait un lien entre Abraham et l'humilité chez ces auteurs-là, ou c'est plutôt l'obéissance qui est soulignée. Pour vous, Guy Brichon, c'était j'ai remarqué sur les lettrines, le tableau, enfin, vous l'avez dit d'ailleurs, en fait, c'est pas que j'ai remarqué, il y a Cîteaux divise beaucoup plus le traité, le chapitre 22, et le traité L, c'est le portugais, c'est ça? Le manuscrit L. Voilà, c'est, il me semble, la première partie du traité qui a plein de lettrines. Et donc, ça suggérerait qu'on est plus attentif à la lecture, c'est ça?
C'est ce que je pense, hein, personnellement. On est plus attentif à la lecture, mais aussi à ce qui est véhiculé dans ces traités. Pardon. Oui, très exactement. C'est une question intéressante que je ne peux pas résoudre actuellement. Il me semble en tout cas que le dispositif de lettrine plus ou moins haute, hein, de taille différente, attire l'attention du lecteur en public ou en privé. Sur tel et tel chapitre. Maintenant, le contenu de ces chapitres peut être aussi souligné par l'importance relative des lettrines. Et le fait qu'il y ait une concentration à Alcobaça, donc le manuscrit de Lisbonne, sur la première partie du traité et puis le début donc, du bloc central me semble tout à fait intéressant. En revanche, assez tôt, on va développer la dernière partie. Et là, bon, je n'ai pas franchement d'explication pour le moment, en tout cas. Ouais, voilà.
Je pose ma troisième question. And for you, I had one question and one remark. I was wondering whether I think Bernard's work have been translated into Old French, but I'm not sure. No, no. So I was just wondering if this sorry, I cannot pronounce her name, Hadewijch, if she could understand Latin and if it was her proper translation of Latin works into Dutch, of Old Dutch. And yes, and my remark is just that I noticed, it's not maybe not only in Bernard, but it's also very present in Bernard that the vocabulary of water and of water conducts is also very present in Bernard, and I saw it also in your find the translation you presented. So yeah, it was just one more proof of maybe.
Mine's just very brief. As to her knowledge of Latin, she has an excellent knowledge of Latin. She has translated a passage from William of Saint-Thierry and inserted into one of her letters, and you see that she translates very carefully, but not word by word, so ad sensum. So very good knowledge of Latin now.
Oui, pour la référence à Abraham, en fait, c'est dans une liste des patriarches pour indiquer que la richesse ou la puissance n'est pas exclusive de la sainteté, simplement.
D'autres questions? Nous avons encore le temps. Alors moi, j'ai peut-être une question pour Guy encore. Est-ce que tu as eu le temps de regarder un peu les manuscrits 14, 15e et qu'est-ce que ça t'a suggéré pour l'instant?
Non, franchement, je me suis concentré sur le XIIe siècle parce que c'est celui qui m'est le plus familier. Cela dit, j'ai constaté qu'il y a une diffusion considérable dans la partie germanique au XIVe, XVe siècle. Alors bon, il faudra que j'aille voir enfin le manuscrit de Heiligenkreuz. Je regarderai toute la collection bernardine de Heiligenkreuz, qui est particulièrement intéressante en raison du lien direct de Heiligenkreuz avec les écoles françaises spirituelles ou scolaires, hein. Je veux dire philosophiques et théologiques. Désolé.
Pas d'autres questions? Oui, Irène?
C'était encore pour vous, Monsieur Le Breton. C'était sur la division en paragraphes. En fait, j'ai pas très bien peut-être saisi ou compris. Il y avait des consignes claires pour recopier le degradibus. Ça, je suis pas sûre d'avoir bien compris. Et si oui ou non, comment ça se fait qu'on se retrouve toujours avec les mêmes paragraphes parce que parfois, il y a certains manuscrits où il y a des paragraphes qui sont un peu rajoutés. 55B, j'ai vu. Voilà, c'était ça aussi.
Votre question, enfin, votre remarque tout de suite donne la réponse à votre question, je pense, parce que s'il y a une telle unanimité dans le dispositif des lettrines qui ponctuent en quelque sorte la lecture du texte, c'est qu'il y a des instructions, mais ces instructions, on ne les a pas. Je ne les connais pas. Mais vraiment, l'unanimité se fait sur des blocs directement reconnaissables.
Oui, merci pour vos présentations. Moi, j'ai une question pour Madame Lamy à propos de ce sermon 112 d'Elred qui parle de pierres qui entourent. On parle de ceux qui n'ont pas trop de vices et qui risquent de sombrer dans la présomption. Et puis, on dit ensuite que pierre entoure. Est-ce que c'est une référence quoi, à la papauté qui protège c'est Pierre, ou c'est Pierre, la chair de Pierre, et donc comment l'Église protège, ou comment est-ce qu'on imagine que Pierre lui-même protège en fait?
Alors, c'est un petit peu compliqué de vous répondre puisque dans le sermon, justement, il y a différents niveaux. Donc, c'est pour ça que j'avais insisté sur l'aspect de charité pastorale et le fait que c'est à la fois le modèle du pasteur et le modèle du souverain pontife, mais je pense pas forcément dans tous les passages du sermon. Et notamment, bon, ça reste quand même des sermons adressés à une communauté monastique, enfin, diffusés dans les milieux monastiques. Donc là, je pense que c'est peut-être même la figure de l'abbé. Voilà, celui qui accompagne, parce qu'en fait, il y a plusieurs catégories de brebis, si je puis dire, et donc il y a celles qui présument de leur force, donc c'est le passage que j'ai cité, et puis il y a d'autres profils de brebis qui sont également évoqués dans le sermon. Donc là, pour moi, c'est plutôt le côté pastoral plutôt que strictement pontifical.
Oui, je voulais faire une remarque à propos de ce que Marielle nous a dit, et justement sur les rapports avec le déconsidérationné. C'est toujours bizarre qu'un document adressé au souverain pontife soit immédiatement distribué à travers le monde cistercien. Bon, ça c'est une première observation. La deuxième observation, c'est que en 1154, je crois, arrive sur le trône pontifical, sur le trône de Pierre, un certain Adrien, un pape anglais. Et d'une certaine manière, je me demande si c'est un sermon où, là où Aelred utilise si bien le déconsidérationné, cela me semble être, par hypothèse, tout à fait admissible que Aelred pense précisément au nouveau souverain pontife de 1154.
Oui, merci pour cette suggestion qui me paraît tout à fait pertinente, mais je n'y avais pas pensé.
D'autres questions?